Hey, I'm Lou Brutus. Always a great pleasure to speak to Slash. And I love all the toys and stuff you got behind you in the office.
Yeah, it's all over the house, much to Megan's dismay. But yeah, this is my office, and then I have a studio that I record in, and that has sort of an office that's loaded with this shit as well. So
How much stuff do you keep, and how important is the sort of memorabilia that you might have?
yeah, I don't keep anything when it comes to band stuff. I actually probably should collect stuff, but I just don't. So I don't have any history of anything. I just collect toys and shit on the fly. The only thing that I really collect are guitars. I've had guitars that I've had for the last 40 years, but I don't have any like cool old posters from a gun show back in 1989 or any of that kind of stuff. So if you came to my house, you wouldn't know I was in a band except for the guitars I got laying around.
And there's nothing that you pick up from other guitar players, like do you have a big fat collection of Rick Nielsen picks? I know you and he are thicker than thieves.
Right. You can't know Rick without having a couple Rick Nielsen picks. Okay. But other than that, no, I don't collect other people's stuff.
Yeah, that's one thing. All the times that you and I have done stuff in person, every time I've forgotten to hit you up for picks. And dear God, I'm not shy about asking. I just always forget.
Well, I'd give you one right now, but it's physically impossible.
See, it does me no good now, but next time on this tour. But you mentioned your love of guitars, which would seem rather obvious, but I think that's probably got to, even with all of the stuff that you've accomplished in your life and your career, being the first release on Gibson Records, I think has got to make you feel pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I've been working with Gibson for pretty much my whole career. And it was sort of a surprise to me when they hit me up about doing this next record as their first release on their new label. And I haven't been with a label for the last 12 years. I've been my own label since 2010. So I thought, well, with Gibson, I think that would be really cool. I mean, it's purely a music-based company. It's not a big corporate behemoth record company like what's been. So anyway, and I know that they would put a lot of work into it. So I said, yeah, let's do it. And it's been great. They've been awesome. And I know all the people, I know all the players, and they have a lot of integrity, and they're very conscientious and go-getters. So
you are very famously well known for playing Les Pauls, and I would be curious if you remember the very first time you picked up an actual, honest to God, not a copy, but a real Les Paul. Do you remember that moment?
yeah, actually, I was reminded of this recently. The first real Gibson Les Paul I ever picked up was before I ever played guitar. It was when I was when I was just getting into it. And it was Tracy Guns's Les Paul. That was the thing that Tracy had, a real Les Paul. I was like, whoa, so I remember that. And then after that, like I worked in a guitar store for a while. So I played some Les Pauls there, and I played some Les Pauls at Guitar Center, just like every 15-year-old aspiring musician, right? But the first Les Paul I ever got was a black Les Paul Standard that someone had refinished the binding in a bumblebee yellow. It was actually pretty cool looking. And I bought it from Guitars R Us, and that was probably 1984. And yeah, that's sort of, and my first ever electric guitar was a Les Paul copy. So I've always been a Les Paul guy. I did go through that whole period of trial and error with every guitar, known to man. And I always ended up back at the Les Paul. So Les was great, man. What a genius, that guy. I was actually just listening to him yesterday. He was such a trailblazer. It's unbelievable when you really stop to think about it. The stuff that he created was so ahead of its time and so unique and original and important. I mean, we've been using his techniques and his inventions ever since. But the other thing was he was just such a fantastic guitar player. And people, really need to stop and put a Les Paul record on and listen to it and go, wow, it's amazing stuff. So it was nice to be sort of taken under his wing, when I was pretty young. And I was familiar with Les Paul because my grandmother had turned me on to Les Paul and Mary Ford way back when. And but yeah, he was always very, very cool to me, and wiped the stage up with me a couple times, and taught me to keep my chops up. Anyway, but yeah, I'm honored to have known him.
One of the things I found most amazing about him, and I didn't know him like you did. I only met him that night at the House of Blues, but later in his life, I think he was fairly arthritic and it sort of messed his hands up, and yet you would not know it once he started to play.
He had a lot of little, what you call, physical limitations over the years. I mean, and he just somehow managed to work around it with a smile on his face. That was one of the great things about Les. He was always so up tempo and optimistic and outgoing, and all he wanted to do was play guitar. I mean, this is a guy that had broken his arm and had it set in a position so that he could play guitar. I mean, it's fucking great.
That's as hard fucking core as it gets, I think.
Yeah. But he's a great role model, because perseverance and hard work and all that stuff is of paramount importance to get anywhere as a musician, especially as a commercial, somebody who releases music for a living. And he was a great example of no obstacles are big enough, and you just got to fight through them, and on, that kind of a thing. And very influential in that way.
Now, knowing what an incredible guitar collection you have, when it comes time for you to hit the road this year, what do you take with you out on your tour?
I'm taking most of the guitars that I recorded the record with the exception of one. And then I just did this fundraiser thing with Gibson and Jason Momoa, where we had a custom shop AFD built for a charity kind of thing. And they actually built me one as well. And so I have one and it sounds really good. So I'm going to take that. And yeah, that's basically it. So I think it's going to be about 10 guitars total. Well, I mean, the thing is when it really comes down to it, you only need one good guitar, I mean, and then what happens is but then you've got songs with different tunings or something like that, or a song that has a tremolo bar that you might need. Okay, so then you need to bring those guitars, right? So that could be 2 or 3. But then you want to have this other cool guitar that just sounds really good, and you start picking guitars to play one song with just because it's a cool guitar. So it is a little bit of a quandary. You just have to be practical about it. So I have one main guitar that I play a lot. I have two different guitars for different tunings, and then I have a couple different guitars. Like I'm taking a Flying V out that I use on the recordings, or a couple of the songs on the record, and has a particular sound, so I'll use that. And then I've got another Les Paul that has a particular sound that I used on one song called Call Off the Dog, so I'm going to take that one. So yeah, I mean, you have to sort of like a guitar junkie like myself can't just do it for the self-indulgent joy of just bringing out otherwise I'd have 90 guitars out there, right? Anyway, so we kept it at 10, and that's with backups, and stuff. So
you mentioned Call Off the Dogs. It's one of my favorite songs from the record. Give me any kind of background you can on that tune, and why you chose it to be one of the songs in the set.
Well, it's the reason we're doing it in the set is just because it's one of those high energy kind of barn burner type songs that are just fun to have in the set. But as far as the record was concerned, there was 4 songs on the record that were written during the pandemic. That was one of them. And that was written at some point when I was just at the height of my frustration of all the, the whole situation, and just itching to get out and get back to work. And so that was just like a 5-minute song. Literally took 5 minutes to write, of just aggressive, and that was it. And then Myles came up with some great lyrics for it, and that was it. We're off to the races.
What about Fill My World? What can you tell me about that?
Another pandemic song. That one was it was influenced by the same shit, but it was more about all the people I work with who were out of work and that were having financial issues, on top of the fact that there was people that were losing relatives and whatnot. And so Fill My World was just a piece of music that I sort of just came up with sitting around. It was a little bit of a depressing day. and it was more personal. I wasn't going to present it to the band or anything. And but the melody was stuck in my head. And a couple of days later, I thought, you know, I'd be shortchanging myself if I didn't at least send it to Myles to see. You know, Myles has a way of finding these amazing melodies out of things that I write. So I thought, well, I'll send it to him and see what happens. And lo and behold, he came up with this fucking awesome, very somber melody and lyric. And so we ended up recording the song for the record.
You know, we've spoken about him at length before, but is Myles Kennedy just one of the most talented human beings who's ever existed, or no?
Yeah, he's an amazingly gifted individual on so many levels, as a musician all around, and also as a vocalist, lyricist, and yeah, he's a blessing to work with. You know, he's really great.
You know, what is it about him you think that you guys work so well together? Because a lot of times great musicians get together and then, you know, oil and water, they don't mix.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was really with this particular, you know, with this band, the reason that we've been together for so long is because when I first met Myles, I mean, there was an automatic spark there, and he wrote this great lyric called Starlight, and great melody and lyric and stuff. And so, and we also got along really well personally. So we recorded a couple songs together for my first solo record. And then I thought, well, I want to do a tour, and I got to find somebody who can sing all this stuff, you know, gun stuff, Velvet Revolver stuff, the solo stuff. And Myles was the only person I could think of that could really had the chops to be able to cover that wide variety of styles. And then so once he signed on to do it, because I didn't know if he was going to do it because of Alter Bridge, but he said sure, you know. So I met Brent Fitz when I was auditioning drummers. It's funny, I know every drummer basically in Los Angeles and elsewhere, and I'd never heard of Brent before, but someone pointed me in his direction, and we got together and jammed, and he was the great perfect choice for this. And he introduced me to Todd Kearns, and there was an automatic chemistry that just happened from the onset. So that's something you're really, really lucky to have that happen ever, let alone twice in your career. And so that's why we just get along really well, and we write, you know, we just play really well together. And so we've been going, it's been about 11 years now.
In the lead up to a new record, even after all the stuff you've done and all the tremendous releases you've been a part of, do you still get excited in the same way?
Oh yeah, I'm a head case. I probably love this more and have more passion for it even now than I did when I started. It's something that just is sort of my lifeblood, you know. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I just love playing, and any kind of vehicle that helps me to be able to achieve that, you know, to be able to play all the time. And the thing about touring is that for me is really the best place for me to learn how to play guitar. I can do it at home, but it just, you know, I really thrive on that energy of flying by the seat of your pants in front of an audience, and that energy and just spontaneously making up stuff and whatnot. So that's really one of the reasons why I love touring so much.
What is the difference then between a live gig, other than obviously there's a lot of people there, and even getting together with the band for final production rehearsals, like a couple of days before the first gig?
Well, I mean, like we're in rehearsal now, and you know, you're really sort of fleshing out the music, and you know, getting the parts and all that stuff sort of focused, mostly just so that it becomes second nature. But and it's fun, and there's energy involved in doing it, and we have those magic jams and so on. But when you get out in front of a crowd, there's a certain urgency that happens, and then there's also the reciprocation of the audience and the band and that whole dynamic. And that's something that you can't replicate anywhere else but on a stage in front of in front of at least a couple people.
Yeah. Has there ever been anybody you've been nervous to play in front of, maybe you were sharing a bill with?
I can remember one very specific gig with Velvet Revolver in London when Jimmy Page and Brian May both showed up. That was a little nerve-wracking, you know. And I saw them before the show, which made it worse. You know, I had to say, say hi and all that kind of stuff. But you know, once you get out there, you sort of forget. But I'll never forget the feeling of knowing that those guys were in the audience for the whole show. That was one. I'm sure there's other ones that I can think of. I think probably, you know, when Guns N' Roses was first opening for Aerosmith, and Joe and Steven and Brad would come and watch the band from the side, and you look over, and you know, so yeah, and then there's probably other ones too. Yeah, it happens.
Well, one last thing before I let you go. When you get a new record in hand, like one of your releases, and you're holding it physically for the first time, besides the excitement, are you ever worried like, shit, I'm going to find a misspelled word or something's going to be off?
Now, you know what? It's like recording the record. You do all that stuff when you do it, and then you just hope for the best and you put it out. And the only time I ever look at it, if someone calls me and said, hey, my name is spelled wrong. Otherwise, you don't want to know about it. You don't want to look and see if anything got fucked up. Yeah, so you try and get all that stuff right, you know, initially, and then when it's released, you just hope for the best.
Well, Slash, it's always great to speak to you. I can't wait to see you out with Myles and the band again.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited. Fucking yeah. I mean, you know, I'm excited in general, but also on top of the fact that we haven't done a gig together since 2019. So there's a lot of pent up energy that we need to dispel.
Any rust when you got together with the guys, or right off to the races from the first number?
Well, yeah. I mean, when we first get together to start to rehearse, I was actually surprised at how well we went through everything. You know, I made a set list beforehand, and we just started running through the numbers. And it was actually pretty good, but I had to listen to some stuff because, you know, I'm also doing a set with Guns N' Roses that can be like 30 songs long, and that's just a lot of shit in your brain. So sometimes you have to go back and listen to stuff. But it was cool because this was, I listened to all 4 Conspirators records for the first time in, well, obviously the first time ever for 4 of them,
Yeah.
but also the last 3 I hadn't listened to in ages, and it was fun to sort of go through them and listen to what we were going to put in the set and so on. And it's a good band, man. I'm stoked.
Can't wait to see you. Safe travels, and I will catch you in DC.
Yeah, I will see you in DC. Listen, take care. It's good to see you, and see you then.